All roads lead to Rome. That ancient proverb has ingrained itself into the human subconscious as an immutable truth. When we stand in the heart of modern Rome, the first sensation that washes over us is one of being overwhelmed. Before our eyes lie the colossal ruins of the Colosseum, where the roar of beasts and the cheers of tens of thousands once echoed. In the first centuries AD, right beside them, just a few steps away, we are mesmerized by the magnificent beauty, exquisite in every detail, of St. Peter's Basilica, masterpiece of the Renaissance geniuses of the 16th century. These two pinnacles of civilization stand tall, like two radiant lighthouses of human history. But have you ever asked yourself, what lies between them? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the timeline between the fall of ancient Rome and the rise of Renaissance Rome. Textbooks tell us there is a gap lasting more than 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Can you visualize how long that is? That is 10 centuries. That is 40 generations of human beings born, growing up, and dying in silence. They call it the Dark Ages, or the medieval night. But the silence of this period, right here in Rome, carries a suspicious tone. Where are the monuments of the 7th century, the 8th, or the 10th century? Why, in the very heart of the Catholic world, where power was never interrupted, is there not a single significant architectural footprint left for an entire millennium? We are told they were destroyed, buried by disasters, or built over. But is it logical to believe that a great civilization suddenly stopped building, stopped creating, and fell into hibernation for 1,000 years? Or is it possible and that the picture of history we are admiring is actually just a mirage, a meticulously arranged mirage, not designed to record the truth, but to conceal a secret that could shake the very foundations of Western perception? Today, Achene, we will not turn the yellow pages of library books where ink can lie. We will seek answers from the stones themselves, the walls, and the geographical paradoxes right before our eyes. The first clue lies in the most heavily guarded place on earth, the Vatican. Look at the walls surrounding the Holy See, known as the Leonine Wall. According to official history, Pope Leo IV ordered its construction in the mid-9th century, around 850 AD, to protect Rome from Saracen raids. But wait, look closely at its structure through the eyes of a military engineer. These are not vertical walls, simple structures designed to stop cavalry or scaling infantry. Its structure is a complex system of star-shaped bastions with protruding angles and receding corners, calculated with extreme precision. In military terminology, this is called Trace Italien, or the Star Fort. Why is this detail significant enough to overturn history? Because star forts were not designed to withstand swords or arrows. They were born with a single purpose: to deflect cannonballs. When cannons appeared, old-style perpendicular walls became useless because they would absorb the full force of impact and crumble immediately. Only angled walls, shaped like star, could cause the projectile to ricochet and create crossfire angles to destroy enemy artillery. And here is the deadly paradox. The star fort in artillery warfare only truly appeared and became common in Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. In the 9th century, gunpowder had not yet reached Europe, and cannons were science fiction. So why did engineers of the 9th century build a defensive system that was expensive and complex to counter a weapon that would not be invented for another 700 years? We are facing two possibilities. One, the 9th century Vatican was home to visionary geniuses who foresaw the future of warfare 7 centuries in advance. Or two, a more realistic but terrifying possibility. These walls were actually built in the 15th or 16th century, the same era as Michelangelo, but their history was deliberately pushed back into the past to create a fabricated historical depth. If the Vatican Wall is a chronological error, then the bricks of Rome are evidence of a technological absurdity. Let's place two iconic structures on the scale. On one side is the Pantheon, the temple of all gods, supposedly built in 126 AD. On the other is St. Peter's Basilica, built in the 16th century. The gap between them, according to textbooks, is 1,500 years. 1,500 years is enough time for civilizations to collapse and be reborn multiple times. Yet look at the bricks under a magnifying glass. The same standard size, same characteristic red color of well-fired clay, and most importantly, the same high-temperature industrial firing technology. Historians want to persuade us to believe the impossible, that after the Roman Empire fell, humanity in Europe suddenly suffered from collective amnesia. They forgot how to make bricks. They forgot the technology of super durable Roman concrete. For 1,000 years, Europeans, living in the freezing cold of winter, abandoned building warm brick houses to return to living in stone caves or rotting wooden shacks. Think about this. Humans can forget a poem. They can forget a dynasty. But humans never forget basic survival technologies. Making bricks is not quantum physics. It is simply firing clay, a technique similar to pottery, which was never lost. Abandoning brick technology in Europe is as absurd as us today, suddenly forgetting how to use electricity, returning to candles for 1,000 years, and then suddenly remembering how to make a light bulb. The eerie similarity between the building materials of so-called ancient Rome and Renaissance Rome suggests a much simpler truth. There is no 1,500-year gap. They could have been built in the same era by the same masons, using the same technology, and that 1,000-year void is merely a product of imagination inserted to extend the lifespan of the empire. If Italian Rome is full of contradictions, then where must we look for the truth? There is a famous saying, history is written by the victors, but geography does not lie. Open a world map and look at the location of Italy. Where is this boot-shaped peninsula actually located? It lies off to the south of Europe, blocked by the Alps to the north and surrounded by sea on the other three sides. To get to Rome, merchants had to actively turn away from the major Silk roads. It resembles a beautiful dead end, a wonderful place for a vacation, but very difficult to serve as the command center for the entire ancient world. Now, shift your eyes to the east. Look at the Bosphorus Strait. There lies a city once called Constantinople and now Istanbul. Look at its prime location. It is the only bridge between Europe and Asia. It is the choke point of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. All, and I repeat, all major trade routes, from Chinese silk to Indian spices, European gold, and Egyptian wheat, were forced to pass through this node. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled the flow of global money and goods. That is the only place worthy of being the capital of a great Roman Empire. It is no coincidence that Emperor Constantine the Great chose this place as the new capital. And pay attention to the name. Italian Rome is called the Eternal City, but the name Constantinople comes from the word constant, meaning unchanging, eternal. Could it be that Constantinople is the first Rome, the original Rome, and the Rome in Italy was merely a provincial town, a religious branch that was inflated much later? To understand the motive behind this switch, we need to discard our preconceived notions of wars and emperors in red capes. Let's view the Roman Empire through the lens of modern economics. The Roman Empire was not a nation in the modern sense. It was in essence the first global economic corporation in history. In this model, the emperors were not absolute kings, but more like CEOs or heads of security. Their duty was to protect trade routes and maintain order. And what role did the church play in this corporation? The answer might surprise you. The church was the central banking system. Recall, what did the church forbid most strictly? It was the sin of usury, lending money at interest, for private individuals. By banning citizens from the money business, the church established an absolute monopoly on finance. Only cathedral and monasteries were allowed to hold gold, mint coins, and lend money. That is why medieval monasteries were always built like fortresses. They were not just protecting holy relics, they were protecting the empire's gold reserves. This system ran smoothly, making the Vatican the wealthiest financial center in the world. But no monopoly lasts forever. When nation-states in Europe began to form, the kings of France, England, and Germany did not want to remain debtors to the Vatican forever. They wanted to regain control of the cash flow, and that was when the conflict exploded. This war for financial control led to the event history calls the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Textbooks say it was a debate over theology, but in reality, It was a hostile takeover of the economy. And right in the eye of this storm, we find the key to decoding the biggest mystery: the martyrdom of St. Peter. According to tradition, St. Peter, the first pope, was executed by Emperor Nero in the 1st century AD. But let's connect the dots in a different direction, a more chilling one. What would happen if St. Peter was not a figure of antiquity? What would happen if Peter was a real figure living right in the 16th century? The hypothesis suggests Peter was a religious leader with reformist ideas. He dared to stand up and criticize the corruption of the Vatican's financial system, opposing the sale of indulgences, a super profitable business model at the time. Like Martin Luther later, Peter wanted to return the church to purity. And because his actions threatened the coffers of the ecclesiastical oligarchy, he was purged. The one who ordered his execution was not some ancient Nero, but perhaps the ruling pope of that time, acting as a brutal emperor. But how to cover up the murder of one's own brother, one's spiritual leader? For money? The Vatican propaganda machine executed a stroke of genius. They pushed this event back into the past, far, far back, 1,500 years. They turned a bloody internal purge in the 16th century into a legend of martyrdom at the hands of a pagan emperor in the 1st century. Do you think this hypothesis of time displacement is insane? Then explain what is visible right now on the tombs of the 16th century popes in St. Peter's Basilica. Stand before the tomb of Pope Gregory the 13th, the man who created the calendar we use today. Flanking his throne are not angels or apostles, but a statue of the goddess Minerva, the Roman goddess of war and wisdom. And on the other side is the goddess Clio, the muse of history in Greek mythology. Move on to the tomb of Pope Leo XI. You will see the goddess Fortuna, the goddess of luck, and again, the goddess Minerva with her shield. Why? Why do these pagan symbols, these foreign gods, sit majestically right on the tombs of the leaders of the Catholic world? The most logical answer is that before the 16th century, the line between Christianity and polytheism was not as clear as we think. Perhaps Rome at that time was still a mixed belief system, where Jesus and the gods Jupiter, Minerva, Apollo were worshipped side by side. Only after the Reformation did the Church begin to purify history, erasing pagan traces and rewriting a pure Christian past spanning 2,000 years. These statues on the tombs are witnesses in stone, inadvertently betraying the truth about a chaotic transition period that history has deliberately forgotten. We have traveled a long journey from the paradoxical walls of the Vatican to the forgotten bricks, from the geography of Constantinople to the financial conspiracies of a global empire. All these scattered pieces, when placed together, paint a completely different picture of the past. Perhaps human history is much shorter than we imagine. The 1,000-year Dark Ages gap might just be an empty pocket, created to hold events that were displaced duplicated, and distorted. What is the ultimate goal of this rewriting of history? It is power. Power needs legitimacy, and there is no legitimacy stronger than antiquity. The golden key of St. Peter is not just the key that opens the gates of heaven. It is the key that unlocks the treasury of the world through the monopoly on forgiveness. This story could be true or it could be false. We do not have a time machine to go back and verify. But the most important thing is not to believe in a new hypothesis, but to dare to question old dogmas. History is always written by the victors. They build monuments, write books, and teach us what to believe. But the truth is like an underground stream. Even if buried under 1,000 layers of earth, it flows silently and finds a way to seep through the cracks of the most fortified walls. Next time, when you hear the saying, "All roads lead to Rome," ask yourself, which Rome is that? And does that road truly lead us to the truth, or just into a labyrinth of skillfully arranged myths?